100 nautical miles. So, I mean, they literally didn't have to be in the Mediterranean. They could have fired those from, London or England or any of our allies there, or Germany, and it could have hit. Most likely, could have made it to Syria. It is a subsonic. The speed is subsonic, which means it doesn't break the speed of sound. They're traveling at 550 miles an hour. Vertical launch missiles, and they also have horizontal submarine torpedo tubes that they can be launched from as well. And so between 50 and 60 were launched from ships. They can either be launched from ships or from ground launch cruise missiles. And the truck-like launch vehicles were employed at bases all over Europe, so they could use those as well. And 60 of them have been fired. Now, there's been upgrades over the last decade or so. Suits are ready to go? Okay. All right, let's talk to Bryan Suits. He knows more about it than Bender and I do. I should say that I do. Bender knows a lot. Hey, Bryan Suits, what are you hearing? You got your ear on the ground all the time over there in the Middle East.
I'm monitoring some social media right now that's on the scene, and evidently we're talking about Syrian Air Force targets and air defense nodes, as they're called, because it's all networked these days. And obviously care has to be taken to avoid Russian casualties, because that's a complication that we don't want and they don't want right now. And so these are targets that we've developed for 5 years.
Are these airfields that are used by the Russians as well?
No, and that was the thing, is the Russian countermeasure had not been put in place yet. The Russians were going to co-locate their aircraft off of their main base outside of the coastal city of Latakia. They were going to co-locate a bunch of Russian aircraft at Syrian Air Force bases tonight. And so this probably happened, was moved to the left, a couple hours and maybe even a day, so that the Russians didn't have that countermeasure of basically showing up with an umbrella all across the Syrian Air Force airfield saying, oh, no, if you hit them, you're going to hit us.
Would they have done that?
They sure would have. Oh, you mean would who have done what?
Would the Russians try to shoot those missiles down?
Well, that's the point, is by putting their aircraft at those airfields, they would stop us from shooting them.
Right.
However, the Russians do have substantial air defense assets in Syria. They have their latest generation S-400 missile with a very, very capable radar. They have an active satellite jammer that sits on the ground, and it can actually scramble satellites 200 miles out in space that are overhead, things like that. But I think there's something else happening in the back channels. And if you follow me on the tweeter machine on your Intergoogle, a couple hours ago I was tweeting out that there was an unusual amount of air traffic leaving Damascus tonight. It's keep in mind, Moscow, Istanbul, and Damascus are all on the same time zone, and it's about 5:30 in the morning there. Around 11 p.m. to midnight to 1 a.m., there were numerous flights out of Damascus to Tehran. There was a really unusual amount of sudden, unannounced air activity, and you could tell 5 hours ago that something was up. The rats were leaving the ship. Right. And the word back channel word is that Putin is telling Assad, look, I'm not married to you, dude. I couldn't care less about you, but I am married to my Navy base at Tartus, and I'm married to my brand new air base at Hamim. I don't care who is sitting on that throne, but it's not going to be you. And so it might wind up that
he's already left the building.
Yeah, that Bashar Assad becomes an ophthalmologist in Tehran.
Right.
Because here's the other thing.
Was that his line of work?
Yeah, he's a British-educated ophthalmologist.
Wow.
Yeah, his English is great. Read line 3.
Right.
That he's got down. But the Assad money, this is interesting. The Assad money, 750 million of Assad money was seized in Spain on Tuesday. Just coincidentally, on the day of that gas attack, the Spanish authorities raided his uncle's place. And the Assad money is in Europe, because they're not stupid. They want they want the rule of law. They want a return on their investment. And all the European countries where their money is have extradition treaties. So he's not going to pop smoke and go to Portugal, or Italy or something like that. He might have to just say goodbye to his money and wind up in Tehran, where they don't extradite anybody.
Sure.
And then people forget about him. If what I'm hearing in the back channels is true, if it's not, then he'll be on TV in a few hours saying that Syria will fight to the last Shia,
right,
and then he and his family will leave and all that. But the main thing I'm looking at right now is, usually the American doctrine for the past 30 years has been an initial wave of cruise missiles followed by follow-up manned strikes on specific targets. And so I'm waiting to see what the evidence of that is. So far, there's no commercial air traffic that is routing through Syria. So
is that right?
Word,
wow.
Yeah, the word is out. Syria is an empty space.
Do you think that's the same missile that may have taken that Malaysian plane out of the sky? That's that same Russian missile that they have protecting their airfields?
No, it's actually a more capable missile. The S-400 Triumph is the Russian missile system that they have in Latakia, and it can engage targets from 50,000 feet at 200 miles to 1,000 feet at 100 miles.
And multiple targets, I imagine, too.
Yeah. It's a very, very, very good system. The joke's kind of on them, though, because they sold an earlier model of it to Greece in 1993 because they were so strapped for cash.
Wow.
They sold the missile system to a NATO country. And
God.
But I mean, you don't underestimate the Russians. Where they want things to work, they work really well. This is a very, very good missile system, and U.S. authorities are I'm sure properly cautious of it. However, I'm monitoring these live videos. There are at least 35 impacts. Now, whether or not they hit the target, I don't know. But whatever the Russians are doing, they did not stop these cruise missiles, which indicates to me that they were told to stand down, that this is Syrian business, it's not Russian business, and everyone put your helmet on.
All right, Bryan Suits is with us. A report of 50-plus Tomahawk missiles targeted Syrian air bases. And where do you think, obviously they came from, U.S. warships. Are these stationed off of Lebanon or Israel? And how far off the coast are they? Would you imagine?
They're Eastern Mediterranean, but it's kind of touch and go there because the Russians have been tailing us, and they obviously the Russians would give a heads up to Assad, which I don't think he would need it. He knows what's coming. The others probably came from the Persian Gulf, and maybe a few air launched.
But any of these missiles that hit Damascus or the Meza airfield, which is in western Libya, they would either have to go through Lebanon airspace or Israeli airspace.
Not necessarily, because Syria has a significant coastline, but also with a situation like this, I don't think we would give AF. I think the word would just simply be to the Lebanese authorities, you might want to plug your ears in a couple of minutes. Right. Something like, hey, heads up, you might want to distribute foam earplugs.
Right. What are the chances that Damascus and...
That ain't the Blue Angels, baby.
Right. What are the chances that Assad then turns around and takes it out on Israel if those Tomahawk missiles did go through Israeli airspace?
That would probably be
they border each other, don't they?
Yeah, that would be his last mistake. Right. And the word is that the Knesset, which is how my agent says Parliament, is actually debating tonight a humanitarian intervention in Syria, which I don't know if that would be a great move for Israel to do, but yeah, Israel has been striking with impunity in Syria the Hezbollah targets who are fighting on Assad's side. And it's funny because there is a real professional relationship between the Russians and the Israelis. The Israelis say, we're on our way, and the Russians say, okay, we'll look this way, we'll look away.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, there's a very serious effort to deconflict the two air forces over Syrian skies, and that is a result of Netanyahu physically going to Moscow saying, listen, I don't want to shoot your guys down, but if you fire around at us, you're done.
Right.
We are combat experienced. You're not, and just because you're going to land, and besides, you don't want your pilots landing anywhere in Syria. They will be beaten to death and drugged through the streets naked.
Is this something that you expect to be the first of many airstrikes, or this is one, and then we kind of wait a few days to see how Assad responds?
I think we're going to shower explosions on these strategic targets and let this guy feel real loss, because he is not. The Syrian Alawite regime has not felt real strategic loss. So we're going to be taking out fiber optic nodes and military headquarters and things like that. And the headquarters, the senior ranks of the Syrian military are all Alawites. They're all intermarried. They know each other. They went to high school with each other. They're running out of dudes. And so when the dust settles tomorrow morning, there's going to be a real look around the room of like, can we do another night of that? Because the deal is, if we did it a second night, then somebody would be waiting for us. They would get a heads up, even though they knew this was happening. They didn't have time to prepare. But 24 hours is a lot of time to prepare. But this,
I didn't think it was going to happen so quickly. But wait, backing up here though, Brian, what was the advantage that the United States saw that Assad was responsible for these chemical weapons? I would think that the story coming out where some of the Russian bombs or the Syrian bombs hit a depot where some of those weapons were stored, and that may have been what killed those kids.
No, it's ridiculous on the face of it, because Assad has already killed 1,500 of his own civilians in over 150 chemical weapon strikes. All he did when the Obama administration said, all right, you need to declare your chemical weapons, he just threw out a bunch of old inventory and said, all right, there, take them. They're more trouble than they're worth.
Right. And
he kept, this is all Soviet-era stuff, and he kept what he wanted, and because he knew that after that, he gave Obama what Obama wanted. Obama and John Kerry got a big international win, and up until 2 months ago, Susan Rice and PolitiFact were saying, fact, the Syrians gave us all their chemical weapons. It's ludicrous on the face of it, because not only did they keep what they wanted, keep behind enough for what they wanted, but they also have the capability to manufacture it. So there has been a habitual use of this stuff by Assad. There are social media films of the plane actually dropping the weapons, and then the other counter argument is, it's not why would Assad do this to his own people. It's, if you're a terrorist group, why would you want to experiment with sarin? Chemical weapons, and this is sort of the worst kept secret about chemical weapons, and why thankfully we got rid of them in the 90s. As an artillery officer, they're a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. They're more trouble than they're worth. Handling them is 90% of the risk. They don't store well. They're a really bad scene, and it just doesn't make sense that a terrorist group would go to all that effort to make chemical weapons and then do what? Put them on a donkey?
Right.
They don't have airplanes. They don't have helicopters. This is definitely Occam's razor. This is what is the answer with the least amount of countermanding evidence. And it's Assad for the 151st time used chemical weapons, and also Bryan's razor, which is why wouldn't he?
Right. All right. Bryan Suits is with us. We're getting reports. Everyone is now. NBC initially reported that there were 50 Tomahawk missiles launched from either the Mediterranean or it could have been the Gulf as well, the Persian Gulf. But what are the chances now that Assad, he feels like a trapped rat, and if he has all those chemicals, what are the chances now that he, explodes 50 of those chemical bombs?
But against who? And here's the thing. Here's the nightmare would be that he flies at first light coming up here in an hour, that he sends his Air Force out north of Raqqa, where Marine artillery, there's almost 1,000 Americans on the ground in Syria, and that he responds by sliming us. That would be a nightmare. And if I were him and I was suicidal, that's what I would do. I would fly out to Raqqa and try to gas a bunch of American troops. But I'm assuming we've thought of that. And that would be, his own suicide.
Right. All right, Brian, we're going to take a break. Can you stay with us?
Yeah.
All right, Bryan Suits is with us, and he knows a lot about this. He's been, how many tours over there? 2, 3, 4?
Two in Iraq.
2 in Iraq. Okay. All right, we're going to take a small break. We'll come back. A major developing story right now. We're waiting a statement from President Trump on the air assault from U.S. warships on Syria. 50-plus Tomahawk missiles have been shot at